Our next speaker, it is not his first rodeo, is Doug Farr of Farr and Associates. He's a real prominent figure. If you haven't met him, we're really glad to have him here today. He came in 2020 virtually in our COVID series, and you can go back on our YouTube page and watch that. He was talking about the decarbonization plan for Chicago then, and since then, you've co-founded the Climate Action Museum, which I wanted to point out is a really awesome place. You should go check it out. If you're visiting from out of town and have time, please do so. But Doug, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, man. How's everybody doing? All right, so I'm going to start out with a test of your knowledge of national news. I know you're probably averting your eyes and trying not to listen, but I've got two bits of energy news, one of which is true and one of which is good. So I'm going to show you the next two, and I'm going to show them to you, and then we're going to go back through it a second time. You're going to tell me which is true and which is good. So the first one, this is an executive order that was issued back in April of this year for the immediate expansion of American energy production. I don't know if you can see the image here, but it was a proposal that came out of the White House to create a series of Trump towers, and that they're windmills across the landscape. And we know the president has been opposed to wind energy because he thinks they're ugly and they kill birds. Apparently, by putting the Trump name on the tower, it was acceptable. So that's press release number one. Number two, September 23rd, 2025, President Trump was nominated for a Climate Hero Award. And this was directed to the Climate Action Museum in Chicago, which actually offers a Climate Action Hero Award. So which of these is true and which of these is good? What do you think about this one? True, good, good, true, not true. Okay, next one. True, true, not good. So this is some dude in the energy department who thought that Trump's support of gas and nuclear should earn him a Climate Hero Award. So anyway, you did very well. So you can go back to avoiding the national news. So Farr Associates, as Ben said, we've been at it a long time. We're architects and urban designers, urban planners. So this is a timeline of our work, and above the line are buildings we've designed, below the lines are places we've planned. We pride ourselves in being among the leading green firms in Chicago. Here's and pioneers at lots of things, at LEED, at Passive House, at Living Building Challenge, and our current pride, our favorite child, you're not allowed to have one, but we do, is the Academy for Global Citizenship. And if people have not seen it, I recommend it as a tour. Lots to say. It is both FIAS certified and now fully Living Building Challenge certified. So I think it's the first building in Illinois to achieve that. And it's the greenest building in Chicago, arguably Illinois, maybe the Midwest. So lots to say about that in discussion. So, but Ben had asked me to come back and reprise whatever the hell I said in 2020, which I hadn't remembered doing. So this is a pretty blank slate. So I knew I was involved with something called Carbon Free Chicago at the time. So I kind of had some sense. But here's what I'm going to talk about. 3 acts: climate reality, climate optimism, and climate action. So Act 1, climate reality. Where do we stand in the campaign to phase out fossil fuels? And unlike Jenny, who had a national and arguably global perspective, I really think all progress is local and regional. And so many of the things she talked about, none of us can influence. We have no agency over those big topics, what the insurance rates in Louisiana are. I'm curious, but none of us can change that. So what I'm going to talk about today are things in our power to influence and to change. So first of all, I think this is not any news to anyone here. We treat the atmosphere as an open sewer for greenhouse gases. Despite a lot of work on the part of a lot of people, CO2 concentrations continue to go up as measured in the Keeling curve. And it was earlier this year, January, where the global temperature exceeded 1.5 degrees centigrade, which was the target to avoid from the Paris Climate Accord. So some sense of failure there. I would just say it was an ambitious target set to motivate people, and it motivated some people, and the fact that we've missed it discouraged other people. So that's a kind of communications whoops moment. If you haven't seen this chart, I think it's helpful in talking to climate skeptics to say the climate is changing. This is based on US EPA data, which if you don't remember is an agency of the federal government that tracks environmental concerns. So anyway, whoops, sorry about that. And this shows a map illustrating how the climate of Illinois is expected to migrate by the year 2100 to resemble that of East Texas. And as you know, Chicago is a heating-dominated city, Dallas is a cooling-dominated city, and all the implications that go with that. And I always say to climate skeptics, don't take my word for it, ask a farmer, because the growing zones have absolutely changed. So this is all back in climate reality. This was an interesting report that ComEd issued in December of 2022, kind of still pretty high COVID. And this was modeled, on the left is sort of business as usual forecast of what the demands on the energy grid locally were going to be. And on the right-hand side is the high electrification scenario. This assumes cars are electric, buildings are becoming electrified, electric heat pump heat is replacing fossil fuel heat, et cetera. And there's sort of two findings from this. One is that on the right-hand scenario, the high electrification scenario, the grid peak capacity has to grow by an additional 150%, has to double, and then another half. And the second thing is that the time of day and year for the peak load shifts from a hot summer afternoon driven by air conditioning to a cold winter night driven by heating. And so those have huge implications. And I believe in the maxim to start with the end in mind. This is one picture of the end. And so we should embrace it and get them to keep studying it. So now I have a second quiz question for you, a little more sober than the prior one. So this is, let's see, these are in reverse order. So let's see, yeah. This is a chart that projects what CO2 pollution looks like in the United States. And you can see the sort of blue line and then a kind of dashed line for someone's ideal of an 80% reduction by 2030, which I don't think we're going to attain. But I wanted to ask you, how quickly do you think the United States could reverse course on fossil fuels? And so 4 multiple choice questions, A through D, I'll read them out. Do you think the United States can decarbonize by the year 2030, 5 years from now, 2050, 2070, 2090? So show of hands, who thinks we can decarbonize in 5 years? A, no. B, 2050, a couple of folks out there. C, 2070, D, 2090. Okay, great. These slides are in reverse order. To answer, this is an unanswerable question today, but what I can give you is a comparison. The United States, in its history, has done really well at reversing course on one thing, and that was cigarette smoking cessation. In the mid-60s, we figured out it was causing cancer. The Surgeon General declared it a health emergency, all this kind of stuff. And lots of effort, millions and billions of dollars was brought to bear on cutting cigarette smoking. And you can see here's the tracking on that, a bell curve, more or less a bell curve, acknowledging the fact that there's e-cigarettes and other kind of innovative delivery devices for delivering nicotine addiction. But nonetheless, the bell curve happens. So to answer this question I just queried you on, we asked the question, how quickly would the United States decarbonize if we did it at the same rate we quit smoking? The answer is 2150. So those of you who were, thank you for your optimism, the 2050 people, I love you. Let's party. But the reality is, I would argue, I don't like making this argument, but I would argue this is our plan. This is our current likely rate of change. So I conclude from this that the biggest challenge we have is changing faster, and the scarcest resource we have is time, which is why I'm interested in talking about how quickly can the Chicago region decarbonize. So why did I put this in? I'm going to embarrass myself. So I'm going to just skip over this. We may come back to that. Climate optimism. So Subtitle here, climate action is 10% hardware and 90% mindset. Ben and Cyclone's clients know this. There's tangible things we're all doing and making a big difference. Most of the challenge is not what to do, it's convincing people to do it. It's like getting in the right frame of mind to say, this is something we can do and we want to do, and follow through and actually do it. So I want to just bathe you in some kind of happy, a little happy here. So imagine a society where you go to Home Depot or Ace Hardware or something like that, and there's a decarbonization aisle. It's like, it's just mainstream. Of course. Oh, what are you here to do? Decarbonize. Great. Yeah, it's aisle 30. And everything on there is a decarbonization thing. Great. So check out. Currently, I think we all know, if your hot water heater goes out and you want to replace it with a heat pump hot water heater, it's a 4-week wait. California figured this out 10 years ago by legislation to require the home supply stores to keep them in stock. Despite CEJA and FEJA, Illinois hasn't gotten that email yet. So I don't know what we're doing, but the number of people who call me up, Doug, my hot water heater went out and they're telling me 4 weeks. I said, well, just your choice is, do you have a second home? No. Then I have to wait, and then the spouse won't put up with 4 weeks of cold showers. So for that stupid reason, Illinois lags, right? See, these are things we can fix. So this is the slide that I think Ben recalled from 2020. I had started up during COVID because we had nothing to do, right? So I started up something called Carbon Free Chicago. Was anybody part of that? I know Katie in the back row was, and yeah, there we go. And so it was a bunch of friends, really, and it grew to be a few hundred people during COVID. And this was kind of my sort of what I had taken from interviewing other cities on how they were going about an orderly set of policies around decarbonization. And so the top two you can see there are the two things that still to this day Chicago did. Early on, 2013 adopted an energy benchmarking ordinance, and later lowered the threshold from 100,000 square feet to 50,000 square feet. That was great. Second thing they did in 2020 was to declare a climate emergency. So, you know, when you vote to say something's an emergency, you think you should probably act sooner. So to my knowledge, nothing has been done since the climate emergency vote. So thank you. So there are other contrasts to that in other municipalities that are doing different things. But here was a prescription that said over the next 5 years, maybe, just maybe, we could fix zoning and building code barriers to high performance buildings. We could start with a net zero code for maybe new construction, building performance, and all electric, et cetera, et cetera. None of those happened. There was one bill, and I was quizzing Katie and Brian at the break, that died. Was it last year or 2023? 24, was that? I can't, my eyes are pretty good, but I can't see how many, okay, 2024. So I think what happened was the city, the people behind selling this and managing the politics, put everything in one big package and said all or nothing. And that was not what other cities do, with the exception of Evanston and Oak Park. We'll talk about that. But big cities don't do it that way. It was designed to fail, in my opinion. And I'm sorry, we're set back for a few years. So here we are. None of those things since the declaring a climate emergency in February of 2020 has happened at the municipal level in Chicago. Just a further kind of happy moment of small crews of independent contractors with company names like Gas Busters driving around town, right? So more optimism. So the federal government has not touched, to my knowledge, the continuing march of ever more efficient energy codes. They're state, they're local, they're really out of the reach of the federal government. I suppose they could cause a stink, but we should declare victory at this. And you know, this is a 50-year march where buildings are becoming, they're twice as efficient as they were, sometimes 3 times more efficient than they were when the codes were first enacted. So this goes on. The federal government doesn't touch it, and we should celebrate that. This is, I'm sure there may be some diverse opinions about this, but in starting the Climate Museum, we attracted a whole slew of pro-nuclear folks who were pretty well informed, I believe. So this is a slide that was provided to me. You can see the name there, Michael McLean. I don't know, is Michael here by chance? But basically said in 2024 in northern Illinois, 338 days in northern Illinois, our base load was met by nuclear. Anybody, you knew that, right? Yeah, I didn't know that either. So I think it's true. And if somebody knows that it's not true, please slap me and I'll take the slide out of the deck. But it's certainly provocative. There's certainly a lot of nuclear plants around the region and across the way in Michigan as well. So the person that shared this slide with me, Mark Nelson, claims that Chicago is the most nuclear place on earth, more so than France. So I don't know, but I'm telling you. And if it's true, if we want an economy that is a low GHG economy, high water, but low GHG economy, that's good news. And then here's one that I think is really kind of cool, cause for optimism. People have heard of passive buildings or passive house buildings. Our office has done a number of them and has now for 8 years, I guess. And this is a chart based on an experience in the state of Pennsylvania, where the state housing authority began to offer bonus points for projects that pursued passive house certification. And these are 3 different years, 15, 16, and 18. And what they're tracking here is the construction cost per square foot in the beige boxes of the non-passive house buildings and in the blue boxes of the passive house buildings. And what you see in the first year, 2015, the passive house buildings cost 5.8% more. In the second year, the passive house buildings cost 1.6% more. I'm not sure what happened in 2017. I have no data. But in 2018, the passive house buildings cost 3.3% less than the non-passive house buildings. And so what is this? This is innovation. It's a learning curve where you set a bar. And the first time you try, it was kind of hard and I didn't know what I was doing. The second time you get a little better. And so this is skill development on the part of architect, engineer, finance, construction teams to figure out how to make it better and better. So when we have, as the city of Chicago does, a sustainable sustainable design matrix with 30 options, LEED, green globes, blah, blah, blah. There is no skill development when I can menu pick year after year. If I pick one and say, this is the North Star, figure it out, the prices go down. So this is not a subsidy. This is just a sensible policy. So this is attainable by us. No one's talking about it. So another thing in terms of the climate optimism is the creation of the Climate Action Museum. Ben, thank you for your support and future support. I'll be asking you for a big, check this afternoon. No, I'm kidding. But the Climate Action Museum is open and it's at 300 South Riverside Plaza. Who's from out of town, by the way? A few people. Love to have you take a look at it. It's open today 10 to 6, Monday through Friday, 10 to 6, Saturdays 10 to 2. And we are the world's 8th climate museum. So if you are, chances are you're from a place, where you're from doesn't have one, unless you're from New York. So is anybody from New York? No, because those are the slides I skipped to be polite. So here's the Climate Action Museum. And one of the things we've done now for 2.5 years is we have this little electronic kiosk that's on the way into to the museum and on the way out. And we asked the same question both times. And the question is, how do you feel right now about where humanity stands in the climate crisis? And the 4 buttons that we offer are from green, dark green to dark red, engaged, optimistic, pessimistic, and defeated. So on the right-hand side, they're inverted, my apologies, but on the right-hand side are 3 weeks of data. And so the lower bar you see here captures people, how they're feeling on the way into the museum. And then the upper bar is how their attitudes change 100 feet later after they spent 45 minutes looking at exhibits. And so you can see this one is basically 81% negative. And then after a visit to the museum, it is 65% positive. repeat, week after week. Here's this data aggregated over, I think this was 6 months. And so the left side is the redder entries, capturing people's impressions upon entry. And on the right is the more optimistic outcome. Now, how do we do this? We don't talk about floods, fires, drought. We don't talk about sea level rise. We talk about very practical things that everyone can do. It's very action oriented. It's positive. It's not Pollyanna, but it's positive. And it also takes into account quality of life. And so these are not shoulds. I'm not wagging my finger at you, you evil person, for doing this bad thing. You might just be happier if you did this. You might like it better if you did that. So we have figured out how to mass produce climate optimism. So that's kind of a good start. So third section is on climate action. And this is kind of where my passion, my passion applies to all this, but especially this one, and the kind of my curiosity on figuring out how these things might work. So climate action, and then the subtag, speeding up change by organizing thousands of small nudges. So stick with me here. So those of you who are in the business, and Ben and Cyclone may well be this, the kind of stalling of the Inflation Reduction Act and other federal funding things puts us in a bad mood, and we feel like we're really slipping back. And that's all true. But I'm going to give you this another perspective, which is this is a chart issued during the Biden administration showing the impact on greenhouse gas reductions from the Inflation Reduction Act. You can see it sort of here was the national tracking. 2022, I think was the year the law was enacted. And then the green arc, whatever you call that kind of slice there, is the projected greenhouse gas reductions expected to come from the Inflation Reduction Act. So pretty impressive. So we would have been buying down about a 25%, 30% reduction. So that's what's in play with IRA either going on pause or going away. I agree with Jenny. I hope it comes back in 26 or 28. But the point of this is, one, it's bad. Two, it was never the whole pie. Most of the pie is out of the reach of the federal government. So this regulates car efficiency, efficiency of appliances and devices, and then power generation. That's kind of a lot of what it does. It subsidizes the electrification of things and some efficiencies. But 70% of the greenhouse gas reductions are out of the reach of the federal government. And that's where we shouldn't ignore that, but we don't control it this week. So the action is where the feds can't go. So this chart speaks to me in a kind of profound way. Sort of Jenny's conversation was sort of at the top of this chart. This asks sort of who in society should lead on climate. So one thing I get when I give tours at the Climate Action Museum is people come in and say, Doug, this is all nice, this talk about local and individual and corporate action, but you do realize it's a global problem, don't you? Oh yeah, that hadn't occurred to me. Thanks for pointing that out. It is a global problem. Jay, I hadn't thought about that. And people say, well, it's a global problem. You should do a global response. We need to scale up. Scale up. I hear that term 3 times a day. And so they say, well, what's your proposal? They say, well, the United Nations. There are international organizations. So last I checked, they didn't have any power, right? So then it delegates down to countries. And here, the dictatorships win. Dictatorships can tell their economy what they're going to do. China's doing a pretty damn good job of directing its investments, its development, and so on. Democracies suck at being top down, right? Evidence the setback we have. All the kind of federal policies are fragile in the sense that they can be voted out and so on. So, and then the other thing is back to this idea of who has agency to change things. Jenny's comment about insurance rates in Louisiana, I wish they were lower, or maybe I wish they were higher, but I have no agency. So we collectively have more and more agency the closer it gets to the individual, our circle of influence, the people we know in our lives, our neighbors, our block club, our neighborhood association, and up to municipalities and probably states too. And so this is kind of where CAM, the Climate Action Museum, is really focused. And I'm going to kind of provide a couple of comments here about why this is something we should really focus on kind of all along. So this is an indecipherable chart of numbers, which I put up here knowing that you can't read it or make any sense of it. So I get to just tell you what I think it says. So what this is, I'm not a statistician, but these are 6 different ways of trying to influence sustainable behavior. And they're block leader, public commitment, modeling, group feedback, social comparison, social norms. Punchline, the top block leader is Leave It to Beaver was a really old show when I was a kid, and there was like a naggy kind of lady that would run around the block and kind of lean over your fence and say, "What are you doing there?" So block captain, someone that is keeping an eye on you, will remind you if you're not doing something. This is a person that is in your daily life. You cannot escape them. Block captain is the single most effective person. That is a live person. It's someone you can't avoid. They're in your space every day. That's the most effective thing. So what is social norms and what is social comparison? Email, the least effective thing you can do. So when people say we need to scale up, what do? They don't send 1,000 emails, they send 2,000 emails. Least effective thing you could do. So what does the Climate Museum do? It's all at the top of this list. The second item here is public commitment. And that is, it's basically someone making a pledge of action in front of people who know them. So what do we do at the museum after a tour? We say, okay, what are you going to do, and what are you going to do? What are you going to do differently after the hour we've just spent together and what you've just been exposed to? And people say, I'm going to get an EV. I'm going to walk more. I'm going to do those things because they are making a public pledge, and we know that that's better than sending them an email. So I share that all with you. So in terms of municipalities, they can be really powerful. The Climate Action Museum has had the pleasure of bestowing awards on 3 municipalities thus far. In 2024, we gave our municipal award to the village of Oak Park, Illinois, who had adopted an ambitious set of policies around building electrification and the like. Just a few months ago, in 2025, on Earth Day, we gave our municipal award to the city of Evanston, Illinois, which did kind of everything Oak Park did, and also a framework for a building performance standard. So really ambitious, healthy buildings ordinance. And then also this year, in a new category for us, the best in the Midwest, we recognized Ann Arbor, Michigan. And if you're not familiar with Ann Arbor, what they're doing, they surpassed Berkeley and all the California cities and all the Massachusetts cities in terms of their ambition. Is anybody here from Ann Arbor? Anybody pass through Ann Arbor along the way? Yeah, the back row. Yeah. So what they just did, in fact, the week we gave them the award, gas utilities are allowed to lay pipes and gas and all utilities lay pipes and wires by consent of the municipality. They put them in the right of way under a document called franchise agreement. What did Ann Arbor do? Ann Arbor said to its gas utility, we want you to subsidize us getting out of the gas business. We want you to pay for it. So why would we pay for it? Well, okay, the alternative is we'd like you to remove your gas pipes from our rights of way at your expense. So playing hardball, right? But they had leverage and they used it. So lawyer to lawyer, and they now have a 10-year, a lot of franchise agreements are 30, 50 years. And it's like, oh my God, it passed, we re-upped it, and we have to wait another 50 years to do this. So they signed a very short one, and the gas company is helping subsidize the transformation. So like, it's inspiring, right? Pretty cool stuff. So, but they're absolutely not sitting on their hands. So the Climate Action Museum goal is to electrify all of Chicago's 1.1 million existing buildings. And I know Katie and Illinois Green Alliance is here with the hub. What's it called? The Building Performance Hub? Is that right? Is that it? Close enough? Okay. I know they're on a lot of this stuff. So, but there are known zoning barriers in particular to retrofitting existing buildings. This is a Farr Associates project from 2019, and we had to go from the 1880s cottage on the left to the 2019 Fias Net Zero house on an infill lot in Lakeview required a vote of city council to waive the zoning requirements. And what were we doing? We were adding 3.5 inches of exterior insulation. And that was a zoning violation. So, and it wasn't something that the zoning admitted, hey, I can see you're not adding more space, you're just making a better building. Didn't matter. So the City Council of Chicago had to vote on this. So let me go back. 1.1 million buildings, a lot of which need this same treatment. Is the city council planning on voting 1.1 million times? Or are we going to fix the rule so that the guy at the desk says, oh yeah, little insulation, this is safe, you're good. So this has not been picked up. It's not on anyone's agenda, and it's a huge, silly, avoidable barrier. So this is one, if you come to the museum and you get a tour from me, I will absolutely scare you to get rid of your gas stove. And I can do it with great reliability, particularly if you have ever been a child or have children or have grandchildren, any of those things. So this is, and I'll just sort of illustrate it for you. So we all know if you install a gas burning device in a building, in this case a house, and you vent it out the sidewall, the code has a required 3-foot setback between where that exhaust point is and the nearest window or door. This is for our safety. The building code exists to uphold our safety, right? And they don't want that known pollutant to backdraft into the living space. Makes sense, right? Code's doing the right thing. Same pollution, same harm, different appliance. It's now in your kitchen, and it's not one of them, but 4 of them or 5 of them. You're encouraged, this thing that you're supposed to stay 3 feet away from there, you're encouraged to lean over it and maybe even bring your kids, and they should lean over it too. So wait a minute ago, the building code was keeping me safe with outdoor pollution by setting the windows back 3 feet, but the same pollution indoors, I'm encouraged to lean over. Building code, what's going on here? I think you got it right there, and I think you got it wrong there. So imagine if you come to the museum, I don't have a simulated baby, but I hold up a baby and hold it over the burner. And so, as the parents like this, sort of like, oh, you're such good parents. The statistics suggest that 1 out of 7 cases of childhood asthma come from cooking gas. So it's a fairly barbaric thing that we do. And in that whole push to decarbonize and electrify all the buildings, this is the only thing people feel emotional about. If I'm taking a warm shower and it was heat pump heat versus gas heat, I had a nice shower. I really know people don't have issues with that. Take away their gas, oh my God, food doesn't taste good. My Swedish cousins claim that Swedish food doesn't taste good unless it's cooked on gas. And they're full of it because Swedish food never tastes good. So like they're making stuff up, right? So what's interesting about this one to me is to get a carbon and decarbonization agenda, you have to meet people where they are. Like, should you decarbonize your house because I told you because you feel guilt about the climate? I think you should, but it's often more motivating to come at people this way. And so if the emotion is removed from it, it's now a sort of technical process, insulate, electrify, et cetera, it goes a lot smoother. So at the Climate Action Museum, we have a lot of teaching that we do. And none of this had existed, when last I spoke to Cyclone. So there are these 3 walls that were actually built for another exhibit and moved here. On the left is the Monadnock building from 1890. The middle is a simulated wall section from a Mies van der Rohe building, 860, 880 Lakeshore Drive from 1952. And on the right is a wall section from the Academy for Global Citizenship, the project I told you about that we, Farr Associates, did in partnership with SMNGA Architects. Great, great building. People know what EUI is, energy use intensity? Anybody not? Yeah, this is, okay, thank you, thank you. So we all know when you buy a car and you check the miles per gallon, you want a higher number, like it goes 50 miles per gallon or 60, that's terrific, right? So for buildings, you want a lower number, and it's energy use intensity, it's kBTUs per square foot per year, thousands of BTUs per year, so you want a lower number. So you can see here, 39, 125, 20, or 26. So we built these walls after preparing this chart. So as I mentioned, one of the best things the City Council of Chicago has done was passed a benchmarking ordinance back in 2013. There are now 3,000 buildings in that database. And what we did back in 2019 was mapped the average EUI of all buildings built in a given decade. This is the measured EUI in the year 2019. So it's all 1 year. It's not the original energy, it's the energy that building used in 2019. And what we saw was this pattern, and it's pretty fascinating that 4 bombshells, one, the most energy efficient buildings in Chicago in the year 2019 were built in the 1880s. The least energy efficient buildings that same year were built in the 1950s. The newest buildings built between 2010 and 2019 were yet to be as energy efficient as buildings from the 1880s. And then the newest buildings on average, the best new buildings, the best in class new buildings could be designed to use a third or a half the energy of the average building. So this told such a story, which is why those walls got built, so that you can sort of see it, kick the tires, and so on. Not surprisingly, glass and modernism has a role to play here. So those mid-century buildings the old buildings were thick and opaque and pretty virtuous energy-wise. The modern buildings, the modernists came across the boat from Europe with a mantra of transparency and thinness. So what was 25% glass became 85% glass. And with it, a pretty good building became a pretty awful building. So we also have a display of infrared photography of some iconic buildings in and around Chicago. If you haven't ever seen an infrared photograph, if you can see this row of townhomes here, one of them has undergone a deep energy retrofit. Can you guess which one that is? Right, so that sort of teaches you. These are all photographs taken on cold weather days, 0-degree days. So Aqua is a kind of celebrated, attractive building, which is also a perfect radiator. So all those flying balcony slabs are not thermally broken from the slab you stand in your jammies behind your glass. So you have to hit it really hard with a lot of fossil fuel heat to compensate for the architect's failure to introduce insulation or thermal breaks. So, and then lots of other buildings on that. So sort of shift of gears here, but these are all attempts to look for the point of leverage, the little nudge that will get to better buildings. So this is downtown Chicago, those kind of historic buildings, brick forward and so on. This is the river and it's all glass forward, right? And so do buildings need to be so glassy? This is the question. So these are 2 buildings that are a block apart by the same developer. This is Related Midwest. The one on the left, 500 Lakeshore Drive, one on the right, 1 Bennett Park. I don't remember the architect for this one, but this is Robert A.M. Stern from New York, a traditional architect. So he goes back to buildings that simulate 19th century buildings, punched windows rather than curtain walls. Without doing an energy model, that one's going to be better than that one. So, but what is the barrier to not doing more, to doing more of the virtuous stuff? So check this out. So there's 2 awards programs in my world that went on in the year 2022. One is the American Institute of Architects, Chicago. This is sort of focused on just the large project nominees. These are all the projects that were nominated for Design Excellence in 2022, the large projects. Here are the 4 finalists that actually won awards. So just take them in, they're pretty glassy, and there's the 4 finalists, right? Now here, Passive House had an award ceremony a few months from the AIA one, and here are their 4 larger projects, and they're the final. These are the finalists. There are a lot more AIA award winners or award submissions than there are FIAs. But look at this. This is what gets an AIA award, is a glassy building. On average, the EUI of these buildings is 60 to 70, just based on kind of what an average is in this era. The average EUI of these buildings is 20 to 25. So in the facade, it's not all the facade, there's a lot of things you have to do to get to a FIAS building being as efficient as it is. But at the outset, the architect's need to build a glassy building causes excess energy use. And so the culture, the professional culture of how do you win an award, you submit a glassy building. It's quite that simple. So my thesis, and we haven't had a chance to test this, is if you hire an architect that wins awards, chances are their energy use in their buildings will be higher than average. It's the award-winning architects that will have worse energy use. I can't prove it to you yet, but that's the thesis, and I submit these sort of visual results. And so what do you do about this? The developers say, the architects say, I was raised to be a glass box guy and I'll die a glass box guy. So that, with that statement, that person just has to die off. I don't know, they said what they wanted. So, and so the developers say, well, it's the buyers and the renters that compel us to do that. That gets rent, where presumably that won't. And I go back to this comparison. These 2 buildings by the same developer within a block of each other get the same rents and sales numbers. So I don't know who's saying what and why they're saying it, but there's a real disconnect there, and with it, the ability to exploit things. So we came up with this Frigimagnet a couple of years ago to sort of target the renter buyer, the bro that gets a big, floor-to-ceiling glass in a high-rise building. I'm gonna get lucky here. And the ladies are commenting, I thought he was hot until I realized his building's EUI was over 100. And Aqua is 104. So there are real glass box, floor-to-ceiling buildings that fit this. So how do we get a little bit of embarrassment or a little bit of shame for folks that sign up to the really energy dog buildings? So that's, to me, is a point of leverage. So we got to figure that one out. I'm really focused on this. She just died was it this week? Jane Goodall died this week, was it? I heard her speak here at the Field Museum right before COVID. And this was a quote that just absolutely spoke to me. Culture is observed behavior passed from one generation to the next. Now, obviously, she's in the field observing chimpanzees and how parent chimpanzees acculturate their children. This is true for humans. We see what our elders, our parents, our peers, our teachers do. We copy it and we do it for the next generation. And this served us well if it was running from lions and knowing where to store food for the winter and all this kind of thing. Copy what the people that survived did was a great idea. We as a society are challenged to do different things. And so this does not serve us that well. So the power we all have is to make those new models the ideal building, the super insulated thing, the Academy for Global Citizenship, that become those new models that people emulate. So the power of pushing through, pioneering, and getting examples out there. So the question I pose is, how can the Chicago region how fast can the Chicago region decarbonize? The kids deserve to know. And so we all know this is long-term stuff. This was a naturally occurring experiment. So we're working with a suburban museum, and we had a sort of sketch problem for kids draw a house. And one kid drew the house on the left, which is kind of how we all were trained to draw a house. You draw a box, put a door, you have a window, a gable roof, a chimney, and then the ring of smoke, right? That's how you draw a house, right? With the ring of smoke. Well, that's the fossil fuel part. So we had a kid drew this house and couldn't tell what it was. Said, what do you got there? I said, that's a house with solar panels. No chimney, no smoke. And so the kid figured it out. So that's all I got. Hopefully there's some time for questions. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Doug. Great. That was a great keynote, very informative. And we do have time for questions. So if anybody has a question, raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you. Amir, start.
So much, Doug. Very inspiring. Thank you. I have a simple question for you. I'm an engineer, you're an architect. How do we teach more of our professionals to dream like architects? Because that's what we need. The ambitions to move faster, change things faster. We can do it kind of thing. Like, how do we teach that dreaming part that is not taught in enough of our profession, maybe with the exception of architects?
I can answer it by telling you 2 jokes. How many architects does it take to change a light bulb? Does it have to be a light bulb? And then the engineer, how many engineers does it take to change a light bulb? Change? What's change? So I think engineers are badly trained, and architects are badly trained at different things. So the architect has been trained to say, your job is to make it look good, and then you hand it off to somebody and they make it comfortable. And already there's so many mistakes made in that simple premise. So to think like the engineer will think and to track the energy model up front, and even if you don't have an energy model, if you do it enough times, I know what it's going to say. So like it's in here. I won't let myself sometimes draw the thing that I know is going to, I'll draw it. And so get rid of that. And then the engineers are taught to find the lowest cost alternative and don't ever believe that someone will spend $1 more because they've been trained, they've been hammered down just on their heads to say, just keep it cheap. That's how it always ends up. And so we work a lot with DBHMS. I don't know if anybody's here with them and other progressive engineering firms. And our particular thing is everyone's at the table. Sachin has corrected so many things I've screwed up. I've coached him to say, can't you do a better mechanical system? So like we really, across disciplines, we correct and encourage each other. So I think that recurring level of trust, not unlike the example of the Fiat building that gets better the more times you try it. We did our first building together in 2006, I think. So not quite 20 years of collaboration. So we carry past successes and past failures with us, and we have plenty of failures, that could be another next year. So anyway, tell that joke and just hire a creative engineer, and they have to be able to speak plain 8th grade English.
Thank you. Another question? Tom first.
Thanks, Doug. Great presentation. I was going to ask what design elements are combining both the Winning the Architect Awards and the FIAS Awards that you're finding are selling the best?
Well, let's see this, our Academy for Global Citizenship, the building I showed you, just won a Design Excellence Award at AIA, or actually last year did, won a Decarb Award this year. Let me get the image up. Hang on, where'd I go? It's up here somewhere. And I think what made this building work there is it's got an architecture forward facade. It's got the slippy, slidey composition of a facade. It chose green as a kind of evocation of how green the building was. This is a green building, it's literally green. So that speaks to an awards jury, I think, in those ways. Other tricks were, it is not traditional in any way. That's the other thing, the modern architecture juries have a really sensitive nose for any sense of traditional architecture, and they reject it. So you can't line windows up. You have everything. Look, the windows don't really stack. They're kind of random. So architectural critics love this shit. They just love this shit. So put that in and make it look like a 1930s, neighborhood school where the windows line up and there's symmetry around a kind of centered doorway. Dead. So there is a kind of clothing you have to put on to win design awards. And it's, even though, if we're at the museum, I'll say, you want to design a new high-performance building, start with the Monadnock building, do everything it did. Start with the Mies van der Rohe building, do the opposite of everything they did. If you do that, but aesthetically, if you do the Monadnock building, and this is 22% glass, Monadnock's 24, it's the Monadnock building put in a blender, right? And in a way that is appealing to modern architectural juries. So, I mean, I'm presenting this with some distance from myself. I had a hand in this. I really like it, but I know in terms of winning an award, if the windows lined up and it was repetitive, hopeless.
Thanks for your presentation. On your graph that showed the smoking being the most successful thing that the U.S. has mitigated, after the Surgeon General's report, I think the federal government did things like ban advertising or put limits on advertising and then warning labels. Are there things that you think about that could be parallels for climate action to that?
Yeah. So a friend of mine is a PhD in public health and coached me on my second book about this very thing. So what they found with smoking is that there's something called structural interventions. And those are some of the things like smoking bans in public places, then smoking bans in restaurants and bars, like that suppressed smoking. Taxes on cigarettes, structural things. They're not, I might do it today and I might not do it tomorrow. Sort of fickle behavioral expectations are examples. When it comes to buildings, a classic one would be, the parallel would be, you're staying in a hotel, for example. The virtuous behavioral thing is, please turn the lights off when you leave. Every hotel you've ever been to in Europe, you have the little room card, you come in and the room is powered up only when you get there and powers down as soon as you leave. That's a structural intervention. So that's 100x compared to please be virtuous. So there are a ton of examples or kind of lessons or strategies from smoking that apply. Yeah, and I think the shame, there's shame too. I know the second wave, secondhand smoke was a kind of, they thought they had kind of gotten as far as they could in terms of leaning on people to smoke less. Secondhand smoke kicked in. And what that was about was you're smoking and you're fine with it, but your kids are getting cancer or being harmed by it. And that pulled back on that. So I haven't quite found that analogy for buildings, but the stigma of being it was cool to be a smoker in the 60s. And you've all seen Mad Men or the TV shows where that was like glamorized. Has somebody up here and it's got a look to it, whatever. But shaming the glass box architect is one of the things I've been really working on. So, and they don't care yet that much, but some are starting to, yeah. And so we're trying to, because of the database, the benchmarking database, every building you see out this window is in it. And so we had an intern last summer, ran out of time, but we wanted to start tracking EUI by our architecture firm and publish that. And so, there's what's it called? Rank and spank, top firms, bottom firms, whatever. So that would be a way of getting pressure on it. If there's more time, I have a longer answer, but I'd rather get more questions.
Got a question here from Tom.
Yeah, hi, great talk. First of all, I can't escape the irony of our discussion here today. And if I look off to my left, I see the U.S. flag directly in the line of sight behind it is Trump. So, like we're being watched. In any event, almost a two-part question. You showed the two buildings in downtown Chicago, one glass, one concrete. I wonder if there's a cost comparison, maybe per square foot of the two buildings to see if maybe that's what's driving this. Part two of that question is, it seems like concrete in the building industry has become a villain because of the high carbon content and the production of it and use of it, et cetera. Any comments on that?
Sure, let me get the image up. And if I
While you're pulling that up, Doug, that project's One Bennett Park and it's precast walls.
Precast walls, yeah. So two questions. Is there a cost difference between these? And I believe the glass one is cheaper. And I don't know the spread, but it's in the low percentages. And yes, this is precast cladding. So it would have a high embodied carbon content because of the concrete, probably higher than the glass. So what I'll say is the developer's making money at both of them. And in some ways there's, if this would be a whole fun exercise. If you look closely at these glass buildings that have floor to ceiling glass and you like take out a binocular and looking at that unit on 62 in the corner, the back of the big screen TV and all the wires are on display. People shove shit up against the glass and it's on display because there's no walls. So people actually need walls. They like walls. So what's true about this one, you can hang art. You're in your dining room. There's a very nice panel for art and so on. So like it's better design than just continuous glass. Is kind of, it's a cop out. You didn't design spaces, you designed an enclosure. So anyway, just it goes back to design. And you know, sometimes to sell the thing where you actually can have a comfortable room and a place to hang your high-end art. I mean, these are expensive places. People have art. So like selling that, designing it beautifully, knowing not to sell it simply on the square footage or the granite countertops, which is how a lot of real estate moves, right? Oh, it's got, you know, high-end bidets and blah, 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 blah. Like, no, it's got a qualitative difference. So there you go. But I think that's cheaper. That's cheaper.
Pretty sure you're right. We invited the developer. They're actually going to be at the after party today, so you can ask that question later. We have time for one last question.
I have a similar question about the cost. The previous question, you showed the picture of the buildings, say the windows is like around and get the FIAS award. So is there some data say if it looks similar, the facade, but say it's 10 or 20% more efficient in general, how much more in the cost developer just in general can say I'm gonna cost 20% more from cost or somehow save 10% of energy. Yeah, just kind of, you know, what really motivates a developer to make energy efficient? And what kind of support you're looking for to make them think about energy efficient, like from the either standard code or incentive program?
Yeah. So I think I understand your question. It's one about cost premiums for doing a better building. And it's about how do you get people to jump to the better building? I mean, I don't know if that's quite what you asked, but that's the question I'm going to pose myself and answer for you. So for FIAS, the findings are more or less, despite this chart, the findings are the first round at a FIAS building for an architect and building team is maybe a 5% premium. And then it seems to go down. I mean, that's kind of more or less what it says here. 5% your first time, you don't know how to cut corners and how to make things work better. In terms of using a crowbar to pry Chicago developers and architects away from their glass skins, I don't have the answer yet. But I will say it's not going to be, I don't think there's an invention that suddenly makes One Bennett Place cheaper to build or that even cost competitive with its alternative. And it's just, it's a lot of little things. So like if there was a stigma to moving into the new glassy building and nobody wanted to do it and the sidewalk had like scary signs on it, like, wait, you're going into a bad building here, that would affect rental rates. And it would feed back to say, don't do that. But as I say, that isn't necessarily the direct way of like, make it cost the same or make it cost cheaper. So, but it's a better building. And, you know, it's not lost on me that, you know, a FIAS building will use, I mean, Ben could tell us, but 40% less energy maybe than a code building, something like that. That's quantifiable, that has a return. If you're a spec developer and you're just competing on dollars rent per square foot, you're probably not going to spend that money. So there are niches like spec office and spec apartment that are the hardest to move. So, and there are architects that choose to work with only the spec developers, and so their buildings are consistently overly glassy and underperforming energy-wise. So I could go on. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Thank you again. Appreciate you being our keynote this morning or this afternoon. But I had one question for you real quick while you're walking off here. Just because we have some folks in the room, Katie and Jamie, myself, we were all part of the benchmarking ordinance process back in 2013. Katie was our ringleader, Jamie was pushing us. It was great, great group, but we had so much momentum then. You're talking about the policies Chicago's looking at the decarb and how disappointing that's been, and even like the new code cycle is the same. What do you think needs to happen? What can this community do to spark that?
You want to take that? No, yeah, listen to Katie. I will just say the thing that's really clear about all the municipal awards that the Climate Action Museum has given to Oak Park, Evanston, and Ann Arbor is the government advances with progressive legislation in proportion to the citizen activism in that town in support of it. So people making sure that politicians get elected, that the public knows what the issues are, and that they're not broad issues, they are specific. We want to pass this ordinance to require this thing. And that organization is not present in Chicago, but Katie will tell us why that is. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks again, Doug. Appreciate it. Really inspiring and great presentation. A couple of notes also I didn't mention earlier. If you're looking for AIA hours, this seminar this afternoon is worth 4 HSW learning units. So there's a sign-in sheet where you can put your number. We'll make sure you get signed up for that and get a certificate. And Doug also talked about the Aqua Tower project. If you're interested in learning more about a tall building being a radiator, we were hired by Jeannie Gang after that project because of the press that got to do a white paper on a new building they built in Hyde Park. So we have a research paper we did about how those balconies really are radiators and things that you can do to reduce that. So check that out on our website.